Good day, everyone. Today, we are going to learn about Coming of Life Part 3. Slowly over a period of time, the land in some places started to rise up, and in some places, the oceans were cut off. In these places where there was very little rainfall, the land started to dry up. If you need water for your life, what are you going to do? You either solve the problem or else you are going to die. The fish living in these places had to do something or else they were going to die. Some of them said, I'm going to put a sack in my body so I can breathe. So they decided to build a sack inside their body with water in it so that when there was no water, they could still breathe. And so the secret of breathing outside the water was invented. And so came the amphibians, animals that live partly in the water and partly on land. The fins became useless, so they were changed into legs so they could walk on land. Something wonderful happened when the amphibians came. The sound of the first voice was heard, a voice on the land. The silence, except the sound from a falling rock or rain, was broken with the voice of a frog. Imagine how exciting it would have been to have heard the first sound ever to be made on land. Meanwhile, the plants had left the sea. They grew in great variety and size, eating and making their own food with air and sunlight. The insects also came, so there was food for the amphibians. They had a great time except for one little problem. Because of the way their skin is made, the amphibians needed to stay near the water to keep them from drying out and to lay their eggs. Some of them did not like this. Some wanted to be free from water. They wanted to be independent. They wanted to go further into the land where there was plenty of food. They decided and developed a skin that did not dry out even under the sun. They also developed a shell for their eggs. Now, there was no problem. These kinds of animals were called reptiles. Now, with a new skin that didn't dry out and eggs that didn't have to be laid in the water, these animals could move inland freely, where there were plenty of tall plants and delicious insects. They also ate the amphibians. And then, what happened? The reptiles had a good time, and they grew and grew. Some of them grew enormously. There was no one to stop these creatures, and they became the lords and masters of the world. They took over the land and the seas, and they even took control of the air. Here is a picture of one of these creatures. Do you know how big this creature was? 80 feet long. This creature had a head that was as big as a man's body. Our classroom is 30 feet long. This animal would fill more than 3 rooms like this. Look at this. He was so big. There was something peculiar about this creature. It had a brain in its head and another down near the base of its tail, so that messages from the tail didn't have to travel all the way to the head and acted upon. Imagine how the earth must have shaken as these huge creatures stomped around. These animals had everything they wanted. The little animals had no chance against these big animals, and so the smaller animals fled to where it was cool, where the large reptiles could not live and could not get to them. As time went on, these animals that lived on the fringes where it was cold developed something to protect them from the cold. They developed hair or fur and a way to keep their blood warm without sunlight. These were the first birds and first mammals. What about their eggs? They knew very well what happened to eggs that were left alone. So, some began to carry them inside their bodies. The birds, however, could not carry their eggs very long because they had to fly and it would make them too heavy. They built nests for their eggs. They sat on their eggs to keep them warm. When the little ones hatched, they fed and guarded them until they were big enough to leave the nest. The mammals kept their eggs inside their bodies until they were ready to be born. When the babies were born, they fed them with their own milk. This was very new. No other animals did this before. Other animals just left their eggs and some of the eggs were eaten by other animals. The young ones had to look after themselves. But the children of the birds and mammals remained with their parents until they could take care of themselves. The weather began to change again. It began to get colder and colder. The dinosaurs disappeared, though no one is really sure why this happened. The mammals took over. They grew and grew. They were able to go everywhere. There were giant animals like giant hippopotami and giant elephants. The mammals had a good time even as it got colder and huge sheets of ice covered much of the earth. The mammals moved all over the earth in search of food and warmer weather. In the end, none of the giant mammals were able to survive. Something very exciting happened toward the end of a very cold period. A completely new kind of creature emerged. It did not have sharp teeth to eat with, nor huge claws to fight with, nor fur. But it had something that none of the others had. It had a larger brain and had the power to think and imagine. This creature also had an enormous amount of love. It was different from other animals because this animal could go beyond the love of its own children. It could love others even others would never see. This creature was a human being. You see, it was as if all of this has to happen in order for the man to come. Human beings would not have found it possible to live if they'd come too early or when the plants were first trying out the land. At the end, though everything was ready, if the earth had a voice, it would have said, "I have spread myself thick with carpets of grass for your feet so you can walk on soft ground. I have put flowers in my hair and covered myself with jewels for your pleasure. My cupboards are full of milk, meats, fruits, and vegetables for you to eat. Down in the cellars are coal and iron. All of me is ready. It is time for you human beings to come." And so we are here. This was all prepared for us and now we are part of the history. That's all about coming of life.